Good morning, folks. I'm going to talk about the Sparrow Missile system featured on several of the vessels I've already talked about, but we're going to talk about both the RIM 7 Sparrow variants and the more modern ESSM RIM 162 evolved Sparrow missile system. So the Sparrow as a missile derives originally from the AM-7 radar-guided air-to-air missile introduced in the 1960s by the Air Force and the Navy. So this missile, again, radar homing, air-to-air missile system. Around the same time, the U.S. Navy figured that they're going to need a close-in defense missile system to defend ships from the faster jets you start seeing in the 1950s and 60s and early 70s. They were planning on using a different sort of missile, the Mauler. That never worked out. So they ended up going with a system very quickly developed using the existing AM-7E missile. They redesignated it the RIM 7 and they put it on ships. They have had a manual fire control rig, basically. It was the Mark 115 manned fire director, where a sailor would manually track targets and that would slave the radar to direct the missile at these targets, right? This kind of worked. It sort of worked at first. Over time, they upgraded it in the mid-70s, and then later around 1980, they also updated it to the point where it was actually a fairly usable and fairly decent point defense missile system. It was installed on tons of vessels and in service with a ton of navies, about 15 or 16 if I'm not mistaken. In the 1990s, Raytheon offered basically an entire redesign of the missile. It had a larger body, went from an 8-inch wide missile to a 10-inch wide missile, completely different fin configuration, completely different motor, and despite being a wider tube, was actually able to be quad packed in the new VLS systems being adopted by the U.S. Navy around the same time. So this was redesignated as the Evolved Sparrow Missile, or the RIM 162. It was adopted in the early 2000s and put into service, and it's been in service ever since. Of course, it's actually been in combat at several occasions. Most notably, the Evolved Sparrow has been in combat in 2016, I believe, against the Houthis down in Yemen, and was at least partially involved in the shooting down of several anti-ship missiles. So, if you want to see more instances of this being used in a work of fiction, check out my book when it comes out this next year in 26, A Letter of Marque. I've got links in the description. But anyways, have a great day.